97.9. Yeah, man, top quality urban radio, Ghana's #1 radio station without apology. This is the Western Region wing, the Takrady wing of the YFMs. We are indeed a Y. One tail and two wings. We have YFM Accra, YFM Kumasi, and YFM Takrady. This is the YFM Takrady branch. Live in blazing frequency. This is your weekend breakfast show, the Reggae Republic. This is the history segment of the program. It's exactly 7:30. It's actually 7:33. Time to talk history. Time to tell you a story to inspire you. Today we're telling the story, a sad story, actually. But the reason behind me deciding to tell you this story is because of the rampant coups, the coup d'etats in Africa. Specifically the Francophone Africa. Every now and then we wake up to a coup and a news of a coup d'etat. Few days ago it was Gabon. Now let me tell you about Gabon. Gabon is an African country. Yeah, it's an African country. One of the oil-rich African countries. Yes. Gabon is very rich in oil. Now listen, Africa's crude oil reserves remained stable in 2001, accumulating to 1,205.3 billion barrels. From a country perspective, Libya had the largest of crude oil reserves in the continent Africa. 48.4 billion barrels, with 48.4 billion barrels. While Nigeria reserves an amount of 36.9 billion barrels. Now, Gabon is not left out. When we talk of oil-rich countries in Africa, Gabon is one of the countries. But Ghana has a GDP per capita of $5,300 as of 2022, while Gabon, the Gabon in question, the GDP per capita is $14,400 as of 2020. Now in Ghana, 11.9% of adults are unemployed as of 2015. In Gabon, that number is 28.0%. In Gabon, that number is 28.0% as of 2015. In Ghana, 23.4% live below the poverty line as of 2016. Now let me take you to Gabon and tell you about Gabon and why some people are jubilating over the coup in Gabon. France occupied Gabon in 1885. France occupied Gabon in 1885, but did not administer it until 1903. France did not administer it, even though they occupied Gabon in 1885. They did not administer the country until 1903. Gabon's first political party, was founded around 1922. In 1910, Gabon became one of the 4 territories of French Equatorial Africa. On 15 July 1960, France agreed to Gabon becoming fully independent. Now, many are those asking, what at all does Gabon has? What do they have? Now listen, man. Gabon is one of the richest African countries as far as oil is concerned. Gabon is one of the richest African countries as far as oil is concerned. They have a lot of oil. Listen, man. A lot of oil. As a matter of fact, if you're counting African countries with oil reserves, enough oil reserved, untapped You can never leave out Gabon. Gabon is one of the richest, if not the fourth, but the seventh richest African countries as far as oil reserves is concerned. Now listen, Gabon is the sixth largest country with proven oil deposits and has an estimated 3.68 billion barrels of oil reserves. It possesses untapped potential with daily oil production estimated at 0.244 million barrels. Listen, with a daily oil production estimated at 0.244 billion barrels. But Gabon is one of the poorest countries in Africa. That is the paradox of the situation. That's the irony of the situation. Gabon is one of the poorest countries in Africa. Now let me tell you about the political history, a brief political history of the country Gabon. Now after they were given independence by their colonial masters, I'm talking about France, they took charge of their country, and the man Umaru Bongo became president of the country. Now Umaru Bongo became president of Gabon for 42 years, from 1967 to 2009. His son, the man who was ousted few days ago, his son took over from him and became president of Gabon for 14 years. So a father and son has ruled the country for 42 plus 14 years, a father and son. And the fortunes of the country, the people of the country are still living under poverty line. Now, when I read about the coup d'etat of yesterday, I hear people make arguments. Oh, especially they use Ghana. They say, oh, Ghana, we've seen coups. And Fashiamba, I actually heard Acrobato made that particular assertion on UTV. And Acrobato is right. He's an old man. He has lived through the coup days of Ghana. And he has actually felt the difference. And he knows that coup d'etats did not actually solve the problems of Ghana. I understand Acrobato, he's right. We've seen the General Akufu, the General Echampons, we've seen them come through with coup d'etats, and we've seen nothing happen. But the coup d'etats yesterday were inspired from a different angle. The coup d'etats of yesterday, from the 60s to the 90s, especially running through the Anglophone countries, were inspired by greed. Black against black. The quest to become president too. For instance, the coup d'etat that ousted Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was actually an orchestration of the orchestration of our former colonial masters and the America. I'm talking about the CIA. They orchestrated it and took down the man so they can plant their own people in there, so they can play chess. They can actually manipulate them and use them to fulfill their neo-colonial agenda. So you can actually compare such a coup d'etat to a coup d'etat in Niger that is against France. A coup d'etat in Gabon that is against France. These recent coup d'etats are actually against their colonial masters. These are coup d'etats against neo-colonialism. These are coup d'etats against globalists. They are coup d'etats against instruments of globalists planted in their country in the name of presidents who are not working for the interest of their people but for the interest of their former colonial masters. We are not proud of them. We will not encourage them. We think there should be a better way of actually fixing this particular mess. There should be a better way of doing that. We should actually find a way to get this globalist off our backs. We won't sit on radio and actually endorse coup d'etats. We will not do that. Even though we believe it's a necessary evil, but there should be a better way to actually address the situation. Because the reality is that most of your presidents, sitting down there as presidents of Africa are not acting in your interest. They are not serving in your interest. They are not presidents in your interest. They are actually presidents in the interest of people who planted them there. They are serving their masters up there. African elections are sponsored by Babylon. African elections are sponsored by either the Democrats or the other party in America, the Republicans. So it is easy to predict African elections. When US will have their election, if the Republicans win, it is easy to predict who will win the next elections in Ghana. And that's why America, they have their elections a year before we have our election. I think this year November, right? Or next year November, they will have their elections. No, we have our election the same year. They have their elections in November and we have ours in December. And once they decide who their winner is, the party that wins makes it easy for you to predict who wins in African elections. Why is it so? Because they sponsor elements to represent their interest in Africa. So you hear African presidential candidates speak with confidence, like the president of Nigeria. He will tell you, I am going to win the election. Whether you like it or not, I will win it. And he won it, as old as he is. You think Nigerians voted for that? That is what the West want. That's why he won it. That is what their slave masters want. That's why he won it. Now the coups we are seeing are against our system. These coups we are seeing, these are not people who are hungry to become president. They are not hungry. These are not soldiers who are hungry to become president. Like yesterday, when soldiers, military officers also wanted to become president. They also wanted to rule. Or some of them were inspired by our slave masters to oust our freedom fighters. They were used to fight our freedom fighters. These coups are not like that. That's why when they win, some of them, when they win, like the Niger coup, they go to Russia because they see Russia as a non-globalist. Russia use the nationalist approach. They are the nationalists. They look at their affairs. Nationalists, every nation must deal with their affairs. When there's a need to help or support, you come to support. But trying to have a one president for the world, sit in America and control every country, Russia is not in that game. No, Russia does not play that game. So many of you are those who think Russia is inspiring these schools because Russia understands the position of Africa and wants to see Africa free and independent. Now, why am I giving you a breakdown? Why am I giving you an insight into the rampant coups in Africa, especially along the Francophone area? It is because there's a worry there's a concern that these coups might spread into the Anglophone countries. Of course, yes. Anglophone countries should not be comfortable. No, man. We should be worried. Because once they successfully orchestrate those schools and nothing happens, Anglophone countries will take a cue because all is not okay with Anglophone countries too. So we should be worried about the recent happenings with regards to coup d'etats. We should be worried. We should be worried. Now I am going to tell you a story of a man who did not plan a coup, but planned a similar act. In the person of Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu of South Africa. He was from a poor family background who couldn't complete education because of poverty. And during his day in school, when they got conscientized, they decided to protest. In South Africa during the apartheid days, it was students who protested the most. They usually protest against unfair treatment, segregation, and dehumanization. And usually when they go on the street to protest, it is the students with their stones against the police and their guns and bullets. They were usually killed by the police just for protesting for equality. Mahlangu said, no, this can't continue. We can't allow the police, under the order of the apartheid government, to be killing innocent school kids just for protesting for freedom. Why are we protesting? We are only protesting for freedom, liberty, equality, the right to live, the right to feel humans in our own country, South Africa. Why the killings? So Mahlangu decided to actually exit South Africa, leave South Africa, go down to Mozambique, straight down to Angola, get trained as a foot soldier so as to come back to his country to arm students who did not have ammunition but only stones to fight police officers who were wielding guns, fully armed guns. Upon his return, even before he went into action, he was arrested, tried in the Supreme Court of South Africa. He was sentenced to death by hanging, and as a matter of fact, he was actually hanged. Few days ago, I watched a film documenting or chronicling his life. A day later at dawn, I woke up to read on various sources about his life. Then I realized, no, with regards to the coups happening in Africa, I should tell the story of this young man. To deter, should I say deter? But no, I should tell the story of this young man, so we know the dangers involved. So as we think about an approach, a different way to go about this. He wasn't lucky. He was caught, and at the tender age of 22 years old, before his mother in the courtroom, he was sentenced to death by hanging, and he delivered a very chilly statement, a very chilly speech when the judge asked him if he had something to say before his pronouncement. He delivered a very chilly but brief speech. The speech actually caught my attention, and I decided to share his story with you today. Solomon Mahlangu. He was born on 10 July 1956. He was born on the 10th of July 1956. He was a South African freedom fighter, struggle activist, and operative of the African National Congress, ANC militant wing. He was convicted of murder and hanged in 1979, set April 1979. Mahlangu was born in Pretoria on the 10th of July 1956. He was the second son of Martha Mahlangu. His father left in 1962, and as a result, he was raised by his mother and his mother and his brother. His mother was a domestic worker. He attended Mamelodi High School up to standard 8, his 10th year of school. He had to drop out for lack of funds to continue. Now in 1976, Mahlangu flew to Mozambique and spent 6 months in a refugee camp near Sasai. From there, he was taken to an African National Congress. Now in the movie, when they escaped to Mozambique, when they crossed the Mozambique border, they were arrested by a group of soldiers, military men, who took them to a refugee camp in Sasai. Now in the refugee camp in Sasai, they kept on writing letters upon letters through one young man, little man called Coca-Cola. They kept on writing letters to the ANC, the African National Congress, to come and rescue them from the refugee camp. Series of letters went out through the young man, the little man called Coca-Cola. Now they eventually got to the African National Congress, telling them, listen, we were on our way to the training camp, but we've been arrested, we've been caught by soldiers at the Mozambique border, and as I speak, we are in the refugee camp. Now, upon series of letters, the African National Congress finally responded to them, rescued them, Yes, took them out of the refugee camp and sent them to their training camp called engineering. They received training in sabotage, military combat, scouting and politics. I'm talking about Solomon Mahlangu, Kalushi Mahlangu, one George Lucky, Mandy Motlong were taken to Swaziland, where they were given large suitcases filled with pamphlets, rifles, and hand grenades. On 11 June 1977, they crossed the border into South Africa and started making their way to Johannesburg, where they planned to have their orchestration, where they planned to actually support students to fight back the system. Now the three comrades in arms, each carrying a large suitcase, were climbing into a taxi in diagonal streets in the center of Johannesburg. An ordinary policeman became suspicious of their movement and grabbed one of the suitcases. An AK-47 assault rifle and a hand grenade fell out of the suitcase. All three of them fled. They took off their heels. In the ensuing gun battle between them and the police, 2 civilian men were killed and another 2 wounded. Mahlangu and Motang were eventually arrested by the police. Mahlangu's trial started in the Supreme Court on 7th November 1977. Now Mahlangu, even though there were 2 arrested, he was arrested together with Motang, but Mahlangu was the only one tried because Motang, during the arrest, was beaten mercilessly by the civilians and the police officers, so he lost his brain, he lost his memory, and was not fit for trial, and for that matter was exempted from the trial, even though he was the one who pulled the trigger, who killed the civilians. He was the one who pulled the trigger that killed the civilians and not Mahlangu. But Mahlangu was charged with a particular law under the apartheid government, the apartheid regime, that still found him guilty, even though he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger that killed the 2 people, but the one who lost his memory and was unfit for trial. Now Mahlangu's trial started in the Supreme Court on 7th November 1977. He was defended by 2 advocates. One, Ismail Mohammed, she's an Indian, and then Clifford Mailer, a white man. So an Indian woman and a white man, Clifford Mailer, represented him as counselors in the court. They faced 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and various counts under the Terrorism Act. In its judgment, the court found that Mahlangu and Motang had acted with a common purpose. The law that they used to convict him, the law they used to sentence him to death by hanging, was the common purpose law. The common purpose law said, even if you didn't commit the act, but you were with the one who committed the act, you actually orchestrated the deal with him, you did not run away, you stood by him when he committed the act, that's a common purpose. And for that matter, even though you did not directly commit the act, you will be charged as you committed the act. So even though Mahlangu did not commit the act that killed the 2 civilians, but he was actually sentenced to death by hanging with this particular common purpose act or common purpose law under the apartheid regime in South Africa. So it is in its judgment, the court found that Mahlangu and Motang had acted with a common purpose, and that it consequently did not matter which of the 2 had done the shooting and killing. Mahlangu was convicted on all counts. In terms of South African law at the time, the court was obliged to sentence an accused, even till date, an accused, to death for murder unless the accused proved mitigating circumstances. The court found that Mahlangu had failed to do so and subsequently handed down the death sentence to him. The court refused Mahlangu leave to appeal. His lawyers then asked the appeal court for leave to appeal, and it was denied them again for the second time. Mahlangu was hanged on the 6th of April 1979. Before going to the gallows, he reportedly said, "Tell my people that I love them and that they must continue the fight. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom. A luta continua." And today, many of these operators take inspiration from this statement, this speech, this short speech from this young man, 22 years of age. Many of these school guys take inspiration from this particular speech. Tell my people that I love them and that they must continue the fight. My blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom. A luta continua. Now the commission examined the cases of, I'm talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa, examined the cases of Solomon Mahlangu and Mandi Motang, and found that both of them were responsible for the death of the two civilians. It also found that both Mahlangu and Motang were guilty of gross human rights violations. Lastly, it found both the African National Congress and the commanding officer of the Congress guilty of gross human rights violation. Now, years later, decades later, Mahlangu will rise to become a hero of South Africa, be celebrated all across South Africa, with legacies all across South Africa. Even though he died a villain, he died at the age of 22 by hanging by neck. Years later, he will rise to become a hero of South Africa. Many will take inspiration from him to fight for freedom in South Africa till the apartheid regime was actually ousted, taken out of the South African system. Now, Solomon Mahlangu is commemorated in the Solomon Mahlangu Freedom Square in his hometown in Pretoria. The square is focused on a bronze statue of Mahlangu. You go down there in the square, you have a bronze statue of Mahlangu erected down there. In the city of Durban, there was a major arterial road named Edwin Swallis, VC Drive, after the RAF bomber commander who died in 1945, following proposals made by municipal assemblies. The road was changed to honor Mahlangu. Now the road is named after Solomon Mahlangu. A main arterial road in Pretoria that runs through Solomon Mahlangu's hometown of Mamelodi was renamed from Hans Drive to Solomon Mahlangu Drive. In 2016, the main administrative block or building at the University of Witwatersrand, formerly known as Senate House, was renamed Solomon Mahlangu House. In 2016, a film called Kalushi, which I watched, chronicles his life and times, where Thabo Ramechi was made to play the role of Solomon Mahlangu. In Tanzania, one of the top universities in Tanzania, a University of Agriculture, the Sokoine University of Agriculture in Tanzania, in the east region of Morogoro, one of the two campuses in Morogoro, is known as Solomon Mahlangu Campus. During the Free Fees Must Fall protest, Solomon was a key song recited by student activists on campuses across the country. This is a reference to Mahlangu, his legacy, and what he means to the youth of today. Even the youth of South Africa, anytime students want to protest, they make reference to Mahlangu's statement, they make reference to Mahlangu's statements and songs. In 2009, the Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth renamed one of its residents after him. In Rhodes University, in Makanda, they renamed Jan Smuts Hall, the largest residence on campus, after him. Mahlangu, after decades of dying as a villain, of dying a sad death, will be celebrated by South Africans. Now it is dangerous to orchestrate bloody attack against the system. It is dangerous. And that is why when you read about Jerry John Rawlings, he showed mercy to none of the people who plotted against him. You face the firing squad, because if you get him, they say you will do him. So if he gets you first, you are dead. That is why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had a detention law that detained people for trying to orchestrate evil against him. Because if you don't, once they get you, you are gone. So the system caught him. He wasn't lucky. The system caught him, and the system dealt with him accordingly by hanging. Years later, he will become a hero. Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu. He falls in the league of the likes of Diallo. Yeah, the South African lawyer Diallo. He falls in the league, no, not the likes of Mandela. The likes of Mandela survived and even became president. But these people did not survive their orchestration, and the system actually showed no mercy to them. Today, we told the story of Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu of South Africa. He stood for human rights. He stood for student rights. At age 22, he sacrificed his life to see South Africans free, black South Africans free. And today, like he said, someday we will be free. South Africa is free. Blacks now can stand before white people like Julius Malema and speak truth to them in the face. Like Julius Malema in the Parliament of South Africa is holding the balls of white South African minority and telling them to their face that this is our country. We will live with you, but you must live with our terms and conditions as the original owners of this land, South Africa. They all had their inspiration from the man Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu.